Welcome to the fifth season podcast, Conversations on Successful Aging. I'm David Lowry, and I'm joined by Don Drew. We both believe that aging is a privilege, and we want to have conversations on how to do it well. Hello, Don.
Hello, David. How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm so good. I've just
That's
had
great.
the best brisket sandwich of my life.
Well, then you must be feeling good. Hey, David, last couple of weeks, we've been spending a lot of time talking about identity and about quieting noise. And, I think it might be good for us to ask what it is that our lives are actually trying to tell us at this point. If we can just stop long enough to hear, we are a place in our lives where perhaps for the first time we can actually hear and understand many of the things that our lives, our brains are trying to tell us.
That is a perfect topic for the fifth season podcast because we're all about this golden period of our life, and it's the right question. And I think most of us have a vague sense that something is speaking to us from the inside and that our interior life holds a bit more than we usually give it credit for. But, sadly, many of us have never really been given a framework for how to listen to those things that are going on inside of us. We weren't taught this in school or very many other places. So as we move through life, explaining things away or looking for clarity in all the wrong places, we come up short.
Today, we're going to call this podcast The Dream Lab. And before anyone gets nervous, this is not something that's really esoteric. It's practical, and it's a grounded way of engaging with our own interior life, starting with what happens when we close our eyes at night.
All of us dream, all of us have REM sleep. That's what dreams actually are, is just your REM sleep. And the images sometimes stay with us. Some people forget them almost immediately after they have them. I believe dreams are some of the most honest teachers that any of us can have access to. So let's get into it, Don, and start with this premise, because I think when most people hear the word dream, they either dismiss it entirely, such as it's the pizza I ate last night, or the noise of my brain that's so tired, or maybe they go to the other extreme and they think it's like some form of prophecy or some sort of revelatory thing. But the Dream Lab we're talking about really isn't any of those things.
I think that the middle space is actually where it gets the most interesting and is the most useful. So let's establish what we mean. What is the Dream Lab and what is it built on?
The Dream Lab is something that we've created that's telling us that our lives are always speaking to us, even if we're not listening. And we believe that our lives speak to us in our dreams. Dreams are normal, natural. They happen to all of us, but many people just ignore them entirely. And I think that they miss out on a really rich part of this. Dreams in this framework are not interruptions of reality, but embellishments on it. They're extensions of it. They're not random fragments of your mind, but symbolic communications that come from the depths of who you are, even if you can't fully see them.
David, when you use that term symbolic, what does it you actually mean? Because I think that word can send people in different directions.
It means that dreams rarely mean what we think they mean directly. Nobody ever writes down and says, here's how you interpret a dream. But our brains and our dreams are showing us images. They're giving us images and emotions of people, places, things, situations, events, and that sort of thing. And all of those are pointing towards something that's going on in our lives, something from our past, something happening recently, or something that's been on our minds. And the image isn't the message so much as it is a doorway to the message.
Okay, so the work is not to actually decode the images of the dream like a crossword puzzle, but rather to receive it and let it open up something in our thinking.
And this is what we try to get across at the Dream Lab. We don't rush in to explain things. We're not trying to force any kind of conclusions because it's very possible that an image that you might have, Don, would mean something to you and maybe something quite differently to me. What we're asking is just a little space as we talk about dreams and maybe look at them as being more meaningful to our life.
Yeah, okay, so that's a very different orientation than trying to figure out what your dream means.
Most of our approach to our interior life is a problem that we're trying to solve. Like, I had this dream, can you tell me what it means? Or I'm feeling this way, and maybe we want somebody to help us understand why we're feeling what we're feeling. The Dream Lab invites a different kind of question. It's not so much what does it mean, but what is it showing me about who I am and what's being formed in me. So if you say, well, who am I? What is this helping me to understand more about myself and what's being formed in me right now? That's pretty rich stuff, Don.
That sounds like a much slower and intentional process. It's something that requires patience that the normal pace of our lives doesn't necessarily always encourage. And perhaps it's something that we in the latter part of our lives are more open to.
I think it's one of the reasons this work becomes more available to us in the fifth season of life because we've lived longer. And so we have more images, and the images are richer to us because we've added more and more meanings to them. And we've accumulated so many things. My little 5-year-old grandchild, Zilly, has a really great vocabulary, but it's nowhere near as extensive as yours or mine. And the abstractness is totally missing. Nuance is missing. Idioms are missing, all of that. And as we get older, we have a greater expansive vocabulary from the interior as well.
David, it helps me always to make things concrete because I think the best way to understand how what you're talking about works is to actually walk through it. So this dream lab that you're discussing, do you have some examples you can offer, maybe some specific dream images?
So try to remember a dream, even if it's just a fragment of the dream. Sometimes we have like a pretty extensive dream, but the only thing we come away with is just a little small fragment. Okay. Take that dream and record it in a journal, or if you're like me, dictate it into a writing program. And then what you do is you cut and paste that and stick that into your favorite AI. I like to use ChatGPT and say, this is my dream that I had last night. Please show me any archetypes or mystical figures, or help me to understand what this dream may be saying about what's going on in me right now. Then as you do that, you're going to get what ChatGPT does. It's going to tell you what these things mean. If you ask it to give you archetypes or significance based in history or psychology or whatever it is that you particularly find yourself drawn to, it begins to offer some interpretations. Now, some of those things are going to really resonate with you, and some of them are going to be like, no, that's not quite it. Just like if you're having a conversation. So that's the general way that you could walk through this. And as you do that, you begin to have this inner conversation between you and artificial intelligence as you begin to ask it more questions. So you might say, for instance, I had a dream that I was on a boat and the boat wasn't really getting anywhere. It was carrying me from one place to another. So I began to explore, what does it mean to be in between two places? This is called liminality. Well, this reflects back into your life. What's happening into your life right now? Where are you moving to? Where have you moved from, and where are you moving to? And what is it that you're not quite getting there yet? You don't know what's ahead for you. As you add your own personal experiences, Don, you begin to get a richness about what's happening in your life, what's important to you, what your mind is telling you ought to think about, and a general richness begins to come in. Exposing what's hidden is the whole purpose of this. It's participating in something a little bit bigger than what your mind is aware of. Your brain is a fantastic memory device, a computing device that has so much information, and we only are able to think about one or two things at a time, right? But your mind has all of those things that you thought about, and it will begin to bring them up and prompt you and say, hey, I've got some stuff here that you haven't really looked at that I think could be helpful to you. And if you're willing to give it a chance, you might discover an inner richness to your life that you didn't know before. Don, does that help make it a little more concrete to you?
Yeah, you've given us a lot of material to think about, but let's talk about some specific images for instance. Give us a couple of really good examples.
All right. So I'll go back to this boat that I was on. This boat, it's a ferry boat. A boat that takes cars from one place to another. And they're usually very plain boats. But unusual about this boat is it's going to take you to some place you haven't been, and it's not going to come back for a while. You're going to be spending the day there, and then it will come back. And I wanted to know, well, what is that all about? Why would I be on a boat? Or where's this place I'm going? Why am I going to spend time there? And the more I looked at that and began to look at the archetypes about travel, water, transportation, consciousness, what I discovered is a situation that's actually occurring in my own life right now. It's like I'm moving, and all of us in the fifth season of life are moving from one thing we had that was cut, dried, well understood to a new place. We don't really know where we're going exactly. We know we're headed there. Some of us are further along this trip than the others. We know that it ends on planet Earth at some point. But even in retirement, some of us are like, what will I do when I retire? Or if I'm retired, what's the next thing for me? I'm not ready to be done with this yet. I'm looking, I'm growing, I'm exploring. This was a dream exploring those in between places of liminality. Well, I don't go around talking about liminality in my day to day life, Don. I'm just living my life. I'm taking care of paying the bills and doing some work around the house and things like that. And honestly, this gives me a chance to go a little bit deeper to look and say, what's really happening in my life is not just those things that I've been aware of, like taking a long car trip or something, but there's a deeper meaning into my life too. It's movement. It's moving from where I've been to some new place. I don't know where I'm going exactly. And sometimes that's a little fearful. And if we all are honest about it, most of our life is built on these liminal moments where maybe we had a heart attack or a divorce or something throws our life in disarray. And suddenly we were headed in one direction. And now we're worried about medicine or operations, court dates, or how am I going to pay the bills? We're always moving in these liminal directions where we're leaving the solid thing that we knew and moving into something else. So this is just one little dream. And I've been doing this for a while now. And so I have a whole laboratory of things that I could pull out and use. And I would love to talk more about that at some other time, Don.
So far, we're just talking about dreams. And sometimes, we have trouble remembering dreams, or sometimes we seemingly don't dream during the night. It just evaporates when we wake up and there's nothing to work with. Or if there is something, it's just momentary and then it's gone. Does the dream lab only work if you can recall what they call a vivid dream?
This is the beauty of creating what I call a dream lab, because life is also a living dream. For instance, you and I talking to each other right now is sort of dream-like in a sense that we're having this conversation, talking about important things, but we also can take everyday things out of life or things that have been in our mind that we haven't really allowed ourselves to think about. For instance, you could look over the previous day and ask a simple question: what lingered with you from yesterday? So imagine you get up this morning at whatever time you get up and you just sit for a moment and you think about yesterday. What is it that's really sticking out to you about yesterday? So let me give you an example of one that happened to me a couple of days ago. Here in Oklahoma, we have had the most hellacious wind for the last couple of days. It went on for about 3 days straight. And when I say wind, I'm talking about 35 to 50 mile an hour winds, sun up to sundown. And what I discovered, Don, by recording some of the things that have been sticking with me and just some things I'd seen in the day, was this. I have been feeling for the past year that there's so much upheaval going on in our lives, in our country right now. It doesn't matter whether you're left, right, or center or anything. Everybody has to acknowledge that we've got wars on the planet, rising prices. We have uncertainty. The things that we thought were going one way are going in different ways. And it's sort of like being blown about. And the question that arose within me as I began to think about the wind that was blowing also was this cultural breeze and wind that's going on. It was sort of metaphorical of what's happening in the country right now. And also a different kind of wind on the inside, because I believe that there's two kinds of wind. There's the wind that destroys, but there's also kind of this biblical wind that you hear about where change takes place in a person. And this is a good kind of wind. It's kind of the breath of God sort of thing. Without getting too religious or anything like that, what I want to say is that we all are having to learn how to live in these storms and learning how to navigate between the chaos and uncertainty of life and culture about us and wanting to have a steady center on the inside. So the dream lab for me was a way of taking some things that had just been ordinary but lingering in my mind and put them down to comprehend what that might mean. And for those of you who think, well, I'm not a very abstract thinker, just use AI to help you write it down and just say, some of these things have been going on in my mind. I've been thinking about this. These are some of the things I'm concerned about. And here's one of the ideas that's lingering from yesterday that I can't get out of my head as well. Is there a relationship between these things? And begin to let it help you explore connections between things that are going on in your mind and events you've seen. You might discover there's more relationship between things than you knew.
So whether it's dreams or these things that are happening in your life and so forth, you write these down. You're
Yes,
talking about journaling here, okay? And I
sure,
understand you're suggesting to do more than just write it down by
sure.
talking about. Tell me more about how the physical part of how that works.
I find morning the greatest time, but other people might find that before they go to bed at night, they like to have a moment of quiet. I believe that all of us need a little bit of time to decompress, let the mind slow down, let the heart kind of settle, let your breath relax, and to get into this kind of place where your mind can more easily think about things, where you're not going to be distracted, where you can be alone. And then you could either write it down physically in a little journal, just some thoughts, whatever random thoughts you have. And believe me, random is okay. Like you could think about, wow, I was really thinking about my grandchild. I'm also thinking about these winds. I'm also thinking about the things going on in our nation right now, and some of them are really scary to me. Whatever they are, and they may seem totally unrelated to you, put them down and then ask for a little help from your AI to say, are there any connections that I can make between these things? Are these just like totally three random coincidental events? Why are these three things ruminating in my mind and causing me to track from 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3? And it will help you sort things out a little more clearly. And you might be surprised at what you come away with. It's really very exciting, a tool of self discovery. And it's meaningful as it gives you meaning. So somebody else may look at this and say, well, this is nonsense. Well, they're not you because these things are important to you. And somebody else may have something totally different, right? They may be thinking about what car to buy and how to make a right decision doing it. And that's okay too. Write that down if that's what's really on your mind. But the purpose of doing most of this is to discover the reasons you are having those thoughts. Why, out of all the millions of thoughts you have stored in your brain, you chose those three random, what you thought are inconsequential or maybe even unrelated ideas, and then try to put some meaning to find out why those things are sticking together.
The Dream Lab isn't the only doorway into this kind of inner work. The program we're drawing on describes a second practice alongside it, what it calls contemplative conversation with oneself. Can you say more about what that is and how it connects?
Yes, I would love to. A contemplative conversation is let's put it in a simple, easy way to understand it. It's talking to yourself.
Okay.
Um, we all have intrapersonal communication going on all the time. Sometimes it's very brutal to us. It's telling us, oh, you stupid person, I can't believe you said that. That would be intrapersonal conversation. That is David Lowry making a critique of David Lowry, but it is talking to myself, right? It happens whether or not you think you should be doing it or not. It is a part of being alive, but it can also be a tool for self-development. And what I have found over the years, and this is something I have been doing for 50 years or more, is that first I take questions that I'm curious about. Sometimes they're questions, maybe about why I want to go to the seashore instead of the mountains or something like that. Or they could be existential, like what is going to happen to me once I leave planet Earth. Or it could be something like, why am I here? Or what's the next move for me? What's the best thing? What do I need to do to be a better person? Whatever question is important to you. And don't think you have to be lofty or high minded. If it's important to you, that's all that matters. And the process is really simple. You just keep your little notebook to help you stay focused and begin writing a conversation. So you talk, and it is a forced conversation in the beginning. But here's the thing that's really interesting about those things. There's a shift that takes place as you do this. And what happens is, as you become more focused and in flow, you'll discover that these answers are coming really rapidly and quickly. Then you might notice that the answers you're writing and the conclusions you're drawing and the constructs you're developing really seem to be much wiser than you are normally. In other words, you know how you normally solve problems and the answers you normally arrive with, but you're coming up with ideas you've never seen before, never thought about before, never considered before, and they resonate really well with you and make sense to you, and you're learning from the process. That's the shift that we're going for. We just stay with our conversation until it is less self-conscious about me talking to myself and more about what am I learning, what is being brought to me to consider through my mind using itself to communicate with me. Some people call this their higher self. Some people come up with all kinds of names for it. I just call it talking to myself. That takes all the mysticism out of it and takes all of the things that are uncomfortable to people about it. But I will tell you this, you will come up with knowledge and answers and wisdom that you haven't been thinking about lately, if ever. And those things are life-changing and will help you move from where you are now to where you're going. And it adds more gravitas or solemnity, I like that word, to your life and the meaning and purpose that you have. So that is the contemplative conversation. And some people will take devotional materials from their church and you can use it that way. Or you could just read some sort of problem that's going on in society or an idea that you have. What matters is that you have the conversation and you let it take you where it needs to go.
I think what strikes me most about both of these practices, the Dream Lab and contemplative conversation, is that they share the same essential quality, which is they both require us to slow down and stay with it for a while, not necessarily to get the first answer and move on, but to stay with it. And that quality of staying, isn't that really in large part what makes the fifth season such a great time?
To me, it's an important time for several practical reasons. One is that we've lived a long life and we do ourselves a big favor to learn from the lessons we've been through. There's nothing worse than having lived and never thought about what did I learn from this life. The other thing is to remember that the people around us when we're gone, these last years are the ones that are going to stick in their mind the longest. They're going to remember who you were in these last years. And if you take the time to think about who you are, who you want to be, those are great conversations to have, not only with yourself, but with your family members, and of course, to develop love and compassion for yourself and others this way. And Donna, also want to say that for people who it's hard for them to sit and quiet and think and contemplate things or to meditate, I understand that. I'm an active person. Get out and walk and do the same thing. You can walk. It's wonderful. Take your headset that has a little microphone on it, like your earbuds or something, and have a conversation with yourself as you walk through the woods or around the lake. Record it all, and then take what you said down in your notebook and sort it out with ChatGPT and let it sort it out for you and say, here's what I heard you say today. And you might be surprised at how some of those random things you rattle off in your head as you take a walk, if you'll let artificial intelligence organize and tell me what is the general things that I seem to be concerned about and talking about, and then explore those topics with yourself, you might really be surprised. You may be a lot more profound than you know you are. You've just never given yourself a chance.
David, one of the things I really appreciate about our discussion today is really what you're doing is you're talking about a new type of practice, if you will, a type of recording and thinking in new ways. We're not asking people necessarily to go on a special retreat or undergo some kind of major transformation. They're to pay attention in a different way, right?
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, I think one of the challenges we have in the earlier parts of our lives is that we are so subsumed by life in general. So much going on, so many things. We're trying to fulfill other people's scripts. We're trying to accomplish and produce. And as we enter into the fifth season of life, what I'm hearing is that we have an opportunity to think a little bit deeper, to observe what's been going on all along in our heads, but we haven't had time to think about it, to analyze it, to process is probably a better word, process it, and to have it help us live better.
I remember when my grandparents were getting older, we all asked our grandfather to write down some of his memories and things like that. And I think what we were asking him to do is to share his wisdom with us, the things he had learned. And he gave it a good go. Honestly, he wrote some things about his early years, but it was too much and too big of a project to do. But fortunately for us, we have recording tools, we have artificial intelligence. And what I've learned and I'm telling you that you have a tool that can take your random thoughts and ideas that if you were just to sit and record them for 15, 20 minutes at a time, and then ask for a little help on, is there anything in here that you could help me organize? And what are the topics that are coming up that seem to be important to me? And as you see them self-organized and laid out in front of you, I think tears will come to their eyes because they've known that they felt this way all along. They just never put words to it. And artificial intelligence can help you organize these random thoughts you've had and help you to see them for what they are. And that helps you create legacy with other people because it crystallizes the things you think are important and why you think they're important, allows you to share them more coherently and cohesively. And here's the key for me, it helps you become wiser because you've taken the time to organize it. And so it's a wonderful tool for self-discovery. And that's to me what all of this is about. It's not trying to be performative to other people or prove what a wise person you are. It is to help you learn more about who you are, what you're about, and make sense of some of these crazy things that have happened in your life that you think, my word, I must be crazy for all of this stuff to have happened to me.
Hey, David, we've talked about a lot of high ideals and really important things, but let's get really practical here. Walk
Okay.
us through a three-step process. Let's keep this really simple so somebody can leave our podcast and actually do this work, this dream lab and this contemplative work, simply as possible.
Step one, you've got to decide that each morning or each evening that you're going to take a little bit of time to do a little thinking. It could be 5 minutes, just however much you're going to do it. And the purpose is you'll either write down a dream fragment that you remember, and it could be just like, I dreamed I was in a store and I was being asked to produce my wallet and I couldn't find it and I felt really embarrassed. Okay, that could be the only thing you remember from it. You write that down, okay? Or it could be, if you don't remember a dream at all, that you just say, I'm going to write down a couple of things. I'm going to write down the thing that lingers most in my mind about yesterday. What happened yesterday that I thought was really cool or made me extra mad or something that's sticking in my mind.
And David, this is what you called the waking dream, correct?
Yeah, the waking dream. You just write it down. It doesn't have to be the most important thing. It just could be, I remember feeling super excited when I went to my child's end of year party or whatever it was. It could be, what's been worrying me lately? And just write down some random thoughts. Okay, that's
Okay.
step one.
Okay, good. Now, step two.
Step two, ask AI, and what I always ask it to do, please analyze these ideas that have been running around in my mind for the last several days or last night. Are there any archetypes? Archetypes are things like the wise fool, the shadow person, or whatever it is. Is there any mystical significance? Is there any religious significance? Is there any psychological significance? Just ask it to find whatever it sees and then read it. That's number three, read it. And if it makes sense to you, ask a few more questions. If it doesn't, just say, well, that was interesting. And just keep doing this. It's the accumulation of that. So 1, 2, 3, make the time, put your fragment in, analyze it, and read it. And it really couldn't be much simpler. But what I found is simple doesn't mean it's not profound. Simple means that over time, you'll begin to see some recurring things coming up for you that you learn, oh, this is more of who I am on the inside. I'd never thought about this being important to me until now. And now I realize why I get defensive about something, or why I get really excited, or why I care so much about something, you'll begin to discover more about who you are.
David, this episode has been really, really interesting about inner work and about dreams and about what you call waking dreams and so forth, recording those, analyzing those. Next week, we're going to be organizing our thinking around three, what I will call demands, okay? Humility, patience, and courage. What I'd like us to focus on next week is developing a daily practice rhythm. Okay, so we're going to go back to the journal or the writing down part, right? And in next week's episode, we want to talk honestly to listeners who have started this kind of work and found it harder than expected, actually, validating the difficulty of doing it and yet encouraging them to continue the hard inner work.
As I've mentioned to you, Don, this is an extension of a practice I've been doing for about 50 years. So for me, it's sort of second nature, but I realize for many people, this will be a new thing. But I want to close today by letting our friends and listeners know that learning more about who you are and what motivates you is a good thing. And we've talked about that earlier in the podcast, but I want you to take the woo-woo out of this. I really don't want you to overly spiritualize or overly mystify this. What I really want you to do is to say, I want to be more of who I am. I want to be more authentic, and I want to know more about who I authentically am. So when I show up with knowledge of who I am and why I do what I do. And that is a very great place to live your life. I'm just telling you that it's made a lot of difference to me. So Don, I'm looking forward to our next episode and 3 and 4 as well. We'll talk about those later.
Thank you for spending time with us today. What we've been exploring is not a to-do list. It's an invitation, frankly, to pay attention to what your life is already saying to you and to think about that and to hold honest questions with yourself, let that accompany you and to grow from it in this fifth season of life.
And if any of it resonated with you, share it with someone who needs a little more space in their life, a little more richness in their life. And Don and I remind you, don't forget, aging is a privilege. Let's do it well. See you next week.
See you next week, everyone.